The alarms shattered the quiet like thunder. Stonewater Federal Penitentiary had never sounded like this. Screams, metal doors slamming, and the echo of running boots reverberated through every corridor. In D Block, two rival crews faced off in the day room, eyes full of fury. Chairs flew, tables toppled, and in the middle of it all, sitting calmly, was Marcus Ironjaw Keller. Bald, tattooed from neck to hands, snakes, broken chains, skulls, he didn't flinch. He didn't even lift his head. "Not yet," he whispered. Every inmate on his side froze. Every officer in the hallway stopped mid-step. Surveillance cameras captured a scene that looked like a battlefield, but Marcus controlled it with a single word. How could a man sentenced to life without parole dominate the prison more than the warden, more than the guards, more than anyone else? The answer didn't come overnight. It began years ago when Marcus first stepped into Stonewater, a young man with anger in his fists and fire in his chest, and involved two other prisoners who would change the balance of power forever. Damian Grimjaw Holt stepped off the bus and onto the frozen concrete of Ravenwood Federal Prison. The sky was gray, and a biting wind cut through the layers of his jacket. The gates slammed shut behind him, and the screech of metal echoed down the yard like a warning. He looked around. Inmates crowded the intake yard, some pacing, others leaning against the fences, their eyes sharp and calculating. Each face told a story of survival, betrayal, and violence. Damian's tattoos, dragons coiling across his arms, a coiled cobra climbing his neck, broken chains across his ribs, marked him as someone who had already been through hell. The first thing he noticed was that the guards weren't running this place. Not really. The real power was in the hands of three men: Luis Sand Moreno from Toronto, Jamal Kingpin Harris from Chicago, and Connor Steeljaw McBride from New York. Each controlled a piece of the prison ecosystem, and everyone else either followed or fell. Isand had a frozen skull tattooed across his back. He ran the communications: phones, letters, whispers, messages. In a place where information was currency, he was wealthier than anyone. Kingpin had lions roaring along his arms, and the yard answered to him like a kingdom. Every gang, every move, every eye in the yard was under his control. Steeljaw ran the kitchens and commissary. His steel gear tattoos gleamed under the fluorescent lights. He had a monopoly on food, tools, and supplies. He kept the prison alive, but on his terms. Damian was new, but he wasn't naive. He observed. He watched how Icehand's men moved through the halls silently, how Kingpin's crew dominated the yard with subtle gestures and nods, how Steeljaw's men controlled the kitchen with ruthless efficiency. The prison wasn't chaotic. It was organized, carefully, deliberately, and silently. Within days, Damian faced his first real test. Two gang leaders cornered him in the yard during recreation. They were big, muscle-bound, and used to scaring newcomers. They assumed he would back down. The first punch came to his ribs. Damian twisted, caught the man's wrist, and slammed him into the fence. The second tried to hit him from behind. Damian ducked, pivoted, and shoved him to the ground. Silence fell across the yard. Kingpin's men paused. Icehand watched from the shadows. Damian's calm was unnerving. He had already marked himself as someone not to cross. Word spread fast. By the end of the week, the three most powerful inmates had noticed him. Isand approached him quietly in the library, where books and tables served as neutral ground. "You've got eyes," Isand said, voice low and controlled. "Hands that can move fast. You understand power." Damian didn't answer. His silence was the answer. Steeljaw, jealous of Damian's growing reputation, decided to strike first. During a routine cell search, guards found contraband in Damian's cell. He wasn't hiding anything. The officers slammed the cell doors and yelled, but Damian remained still, unshaken. He knew who had set him up. Steeljaw's betrayal was blatant, and it sparked the first real confrontation. The next day, Damian confronted Steeljaw in the yard. The morning sun glinted off Steeljaw's forearm tattoos. The yard fell quiet as Damian walked past him, whispering, "Remember." That word spread through Ravenwood faster than any fight. By night, Damian lay in his cell, staring at the shadows dancing across his tattoos, thinking about the patterns he had already begun to see. Ravenwood wasn't just a prison, it was a chessboard. Damien observed routines closely. Guards made rounds at precise intervals. Meals came at set times. Recreation, laundry, and work assignments all follow patterns. Every gesture, glance, and movement among inmates carried information. Damien absorbed it all. He noticed how Kingpin signaled his crew with subtle nods, how Icehand passed messages through coded movements during meals, how Steeljaw's men prioritized supplies for loyalty. Every action, every rule had a hidden purpose. By the second week, Damien started testing the waters. He helped a younger inmate fend off a beating from a gang member aligned with Steeljaw. He intercepted a verbal attack in the yard before it could escalate. Each time, his presence shifted the balance, quietly demonstrating that he wasn't just a fighter. He was a strategist. Rumors began to swirl. Damien Grimjaw Holt, new but already untouchable in the yard. Steeljaw grew restless, sending minor threats and coded messages, trying to intimidate him. Icehand watched silently, seemingly calculating whether Damien could be an ally or a threat. Kingpin, meanwhile, observed Damien in the yard, his crew unconsciously giving space when Damien passed by. One night, in the darkness of his cell, Damien traced his finger over a fresh scratch on the wall, words carved by another inmate. "You're ready, T.O., take control." He didn't know who wrote it, but he understood the message. This wasn't just survival anymore. Damien was being invited, or challenged, to rise above the system. By the third week, he had begun forming alliances quietly. Some younger inmates gravitated to him naturally, sensing his intelligence and restraint. He started learning how to manipulate information, how to move people without touching them, how to ensure loyalty through subtle gestures. Every interaction was a test, every observation a lesson. Steeljaw tried another move, planting tension in the kitchen, spreading rumors that Damien had insulted his crew. Damien remained patient. He observed, collected information, and waited. The chessboard was set, and he was beginning to see the moves before anyone else. By the end of the month, Damien wasn't just surviving. He was shaping Ravenwood from the shadows. Guards noticed a new order, subtle but undeniable. Inmates began looking to him in ways they hadn't looked to anyone before. Even the most powerful, Icehand, Kingpin, Steeljaw, realized Damien was no longer a newcomer. He was a rising force, quiet, calculating, and unstoppable. The final scene of Chapter 1. Damien sat in the rec yard at dusk, tattoos glinting under the fading sunlight. He watched Steeljaw's crew bicker, Kingpin's men parade, and Icehand's eyes scan from the fence. Damien smiled slightly, knowing the next move would change everything. Ravenwood wasn't just a prison anymore. It was his game, and the first pieces were already in place. By the time Marcus stepped back into the yard after his week in isolation, everything felt different. The sunlight bounced off the concrete walls, harsh and unyielding, but he barely noticed. He scanned D-Block. Every gang, every crew, every single inmate moved with a rhythm that he had already begun to understand. The first to approach him was Luis Icehand Moreno. The Toronto inmate was tall, thin, with a frozen skull tattooed across his back and icy blue eyes that seemed to pierce through the chaos of the yard. He didn't speak at first. He just watched Marcus. Then, slowly, he extended a hand. "You've got potential," he said. "And potential can be dangerous if it's not managed." Marcus shook it without a word. Next came Jamal Kingpin Harris, Chicago's own lion-armed enforcer. He strolled through the yard like a king inspecting his territory, every man in his crew pausing as he passed. Kingpin had already seen the way Marcus handled the first fight. He knew Marcus wasn't just strong, he was smart. "You're quick, man," Kingpin said, eyes sharp. "You move like you're playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. That'll get you killed here, or make you king." Then, the quietest of the three, Connor Steeljaw McBride, appeared. His steel gear tattoos gleamed under the yard lights, arms crossed, eyes calculating. "You're stepping on toes," he said, "and toes get broken." Marcus didn't flinch. Instead, he observed. Steeljaw ran the kitchen, the supply lines, and controlled survival in ways most inmates didn't even notice. Over the next days, Marcus began learning the invisible rules of Ravenwood. Aishan taught him the language of the prison, the subtle signs, the coded movements, the whispers that spread faster than the guards could react. He showed Marcus how a note passed between two laundry workers could relay a warning across the yard in minutes. Kingpin taught him influence, how to assert power without violence, how to move gangs with nothing more than a nod, a glance, or a strategically placed comment. Marcus learned that sometimes silence was louder than a punch, and fear could be a tool as effective as a weapon. Steeljaw, ever watchful, tried to manipulate Marcus by restricting access to work assignments, rationing supplies, and sending minor threats through his men. But Marcus adapted. He watched, memorized, and waited for the perfect moment to shift the balance. That moment came during a routine kitchen shift. A scuffle broke out between two rival crews over who would deliver trays to the upper cells. Marcus stepped in, not with fists but with words. He calmly separated the men, pointing out that one mistake could bring lockdown for the entire block. In that instant, Marcus earned the first of many quiet loyalties. Rumors began circulating that Marcus was aligning himself with Ice Hand and Kingpin. Steeljaw noticed immediately. He sent small attacks, whispers, and veiled threats, but Marcus ignored the provocations. Each time, he let the tension build, observing who reacted and how. By the end of the month, Marcus was no longer a newcomer. He was part strategist, part enforcer, part observer. Guards noticed the subtle change in the yard. Inmates felt it in the quiet way gangs shifted when he walked by. Even Ice Hand, Kingpin, and Steeljaw realized Marcus was no longer just a potential ally. He was a force to be reckoned with. The first real test of his influence came when Steeljaw attempted a direct attack. A knife, smuggled from the carpentry shop, appeared in the hands of one of Steeljaw's men during recreation. Marcus noticed it before anyone else. He moved quickly, but not violently. A single step, a glare, and the man froze. The yard watched, tense and silent. Marcus didn't shout. He didn't fight. He simply stared. Steeljaw's man dropped the blade. Everyone understood. Marcus had the upper hand. But Steeljaw wasn't finished. He had convinced half the block that Marcus intended to seize control of the kitchens, the yard, and the phones in one calculated move. Tension rippled through D-Block. Inmates whispered. Crews shifted their alliances. Guards remained unaware, thinking it was just another rumor. Marcus sat at the far end of the yard, arms crossed, tattoos glinting in the sunlight. Ice Hand and Kingpin flanked him. Together, they represented a new power structure, one that threatened to rewrite the rules of Ravenwood. And then it happened. The alarms blared. The yard froze. Rival crews surged forward, ready to fight, but Marcus raised a single hand. Not yet, he said. All eyes turned toward the entrance of D-Block. Heavy boots echoed on concrete. A figure appeared, a former UK gang leader turned federal informant, escorted by officers. The entire yard fell silent. Marcus's calm gaze met the man's. Every inmate knew. The next move wouldn't just decide who ran the yard. It would decide who truly controlled Ravenwood. The yard was tense, heavy with the kind of silence that precedes violence. Marcus Ironjaw Keller sat at the chess table, tattoos glinting under the fading fluorescent lights, dragons coiling across his biceps, broken chains trailing across his chest, skulls etched along his forearms. Ice Hand and Kingpin flanked him, calm but alert. Every movement, every whisper, every shift in the yard was a potential spark. Through the entrance of D-Block strode Callum Frostbite Reed, the UK gang leader turned federal informant. His arms were covered in snarling wolves, jagged lightning bolts, and tally marks for years spent behind bars. His icy gaze swept the yard, taking in Marcus, Ice Hand, and Kingpin, then the rest of the inmates. The message was clear. He had come to test the throne. The rival crews tensed, unsure whether to attack or wait. Whispers spread quickly. Frostbite's here. This is bigger than Marcus. Even the guards paused at the edges of the yard, unsure how much control they actually had. Marcus rose slowly, walking forward with measured steps, chest high, eyes locked on Frostbite. No one dared move ahead of him. No one dared speak. Tension pressed down like iron. Frostbite's smirk widened. "So this is the famous Iron Jaw," he said. "I've heard stories." Before Marcus could respond, Steeljaw's men launched a surprise attack. Two knives glinted in the dim light as they surged forward. Chairs flew. Inmates shouted. The air erupted with chaos. But Marcus didn't panic. He moved with precision. One attacker lunged. Marcus grabbed his wrist, twisted it, and sent him crashing into a steel table. The second swung wildly. Marcus ducked, pivoted, and shoved him into the wall. Ice Hand and Kingpin moved like extensions of his will, neutralizing threats without excessive force. The yard watched in stunned silence. Frostbite's smirk faded. Marcus wasn't just muscle. He was control, patience, and strategy wrapped into one. Steeljaw's authority crumbled. His men faltered, unsure if they were supposed to fight or retreat. Marcus's calm dominance was undeniable. Frostbite took a step forward. "I didn't come here to watch petty fights," he said, voice carrying across the yard. "I want to see who truly rules this prison." Marcus tilted his head, meeting Frostbite's gaze. "Not yet," he whispered. It was a warning, a statement, and a promise all at once. The rival crews froze. Whispers ran like wildfire. Marcus controls it all. Even Frostbite doesn't scare him. The yard became a living chessboard. Every inmate, every gang member, every minor player was a piece in a dangerous game of power and survival. Then the faint clanging from the upper tier caught Marcus's attention. Another crew had arrived, unseen, watching, calculating. He didn't flinch. He had studied this pattern for weeks. The way reinforcements always came from the shadows, the timing, the subtle signals. Every new presence was a test of his control, and he had learned to anticipate it. Marcus moved toward Frostbite, a calm predator in the chaos. "You don't understand this place," he said, voice low but carrying. "You came expecting a fight. What you're facing is control. And control isn't won in seconds. It's earned in patience, in strategy, and in respect." Frostbite's expression flickered. "In respect?" he asked. "How do I earn it?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he surveyed the yard, noting every twitch, every glance, every hidden weapon. Then he spoke. "By surviving, by watching, by knowing when to act and when to wait. You've already taken the first step by coming here." Tension remained thick. Steeljaw, still lurking at the edges, tried to regain ground, signaling small crews to move in from the kitchen and yard. But Marcus anticipated each action, subtly guiding Ice Hand and Kingpin to intercept without anyone noticing. The yard seemed almost choreographed, the chaos perfectly contained, controlled, directed. Hours passed. Frostbite's men tested the perimeter, through challenges, tried to provoke fights. Marcus responded without panic, neutralizing threats with minimal violence, displaying dominance not through fear, but precision and authority. Inmates began whispering, watching the shift in power. Marcus, Iron Jaw, Keller wasn't just a name. They understood he had claimed the block. By nightfall, order had returned. Crews slunk back to corners. The rival gangs withdrew, murmuring warnings and acknowledgement of Marcus's authority. Frostbite remained near the entrance, silent, calculating, realizing that the battle for dominance wasn't over. But the first round had been decisively won. Marcus returned to the chess table, seating himself deliberately. Ice Hand and Kingpin flanked him. The yard was calm now, controlled by respect and fear intertwined. Frostbite lingered at the edge, eyes sharp, realizing Marcus had not only survived the confrontation, he had ruled it. The last rays of sunlight glinted across the walls, illuminating Marcus's tattoos. Dragons, chains, skulls, they reflected not just his past, but the control he had carved from chaos. He leaned back, arms resting on the table, and whispered to himself, "This is my world now." The yard had changed forever. Marcus had survived attacks, neutralized threats, and demonstrated that power in Stonewater Federal Penitentiary was no longer in the hands of the warden, the guards, or anyone else, but in his. And as the night settled over the prison, the quiet carried a warning. Stonewater belonged to Marcus Ironjaw Keller, and anyone daring to challenge him would learn just how carefully he had earned that throne. The chapter, and the story's arc, ended with a sense of control, dominance, and a lingering tension that life in prison could shift at any moment. Marcus had claimed the block, but the shadows promised new challenges tomorrow. The alarms shattered the quiet like thunder. Stonewater Federal Penitentiary had never sounded like this. Screams, metal doors slamming, and the echo of running boots reverberated through every corridor. In D Block, two rival crews faced off in the day room, chairs flying, tables toppling. And in the middle of it all, sitting calmly, was Marcus Ironjaw Keller. Bald, tattooed from neck to hands. Snakes, dragons, broken chain skulls, he didn't flinch. "Not yet," he whispered. Every inmate froze. Every officer halted. Marcus controlled chaos with a single word. But this dominance didn't come overnight. Marcus first arrived at Stonewater as a young man with anger in his fists and fire in his chest. The prison wasn't run by the warden or the guards. It was controlled by three inmates: Luis Isan Moreno, Jamal Kingpin Harris, and Connor Steeljaw McBride. Icehand ruled communications, Kingpin the yard, Steeljaw the kitchen and supplies. Marcus observed everything, learning their rules, their gestures, their power. His first test came fast. Two rival gang members cornered him in the yard. Marcus twisted, ducked, and threw them to the ground, showing skill and intelligence. Word spread. Icehand approached him quietly. "You've got eyes and hands that move fast. You understand power." Marcus didn't answer. Steeljaw tried to frame him with contraband, but Marcus stayed calm, surviving the first trap. He learned the chessboard of the prison, who to ally with, who to avoid when a strike. Weeks passed. Marcus formed alliances, quietly gaining loyalty through calculated actions. A fight in the kitchen over supplies became his first major move. He diffused it with words, not violence. Guards noticed subtle changes. Inmates shifted. Steeljaw attempted to intimidate him, spreading rumors and sending minor attacks. But Marcus anticipated every move. By the end of the month, Icehand, Kingpin, and even the rival gangs recognized Marcus as a rising force. Then came the ultimate test. Frostbite, a notorious UK gang leader, arrived as an informant, escorted by officers. Steeljaw's men launched knives, triggering chaos. Marcus moved with precision, neutralizing attacks, guiding Icehand and Kingpin strategically, turning the yard into a controlled battlefield. Frostbite realized Marcus wasn't just strong, he was a strategist. Rival crews watched in awe. Steeljaw's authority crumbled. By nightfall, order returned. Marcus had not only survived but claimed D Block. Inmates whispered his name with a mix of fear and respect. Frostbite lingered at the edge, calculating. Marcus leaned back at the chess table, tattoos glinting in the fading light, and whispered, "This is my world now." Stonewater had changed. Power no longer rested with the warden or the guards. It was in the hands of Marcus Ironjaw Keller. But in the shadows, the whispers promised new challenges. The game wasn't over. It had only just begun.